after 2 years, and before that you've been a lot around in Germany, in Austria, in Switzerland, and Europe.
Yep.
So what happened during the last 2 years? And it's very interesting for us, so some of us are here from the house. So we started with Dragon Dreaming. What happened in the meantime?
Yeah, lots of stories. First of all, I have some questions for you. Because I know that there is a number of people here that I have trained, but also there are Austrian dragon dreamers who train other people too. And I know that at least 1, 2, 3, maybe more of those people are here tonight. So what I'd like to ask is how many people here have had an exposure to dragon dreaming? You can put your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. It's about a third. So the other 2/3 are newbies. They're new, and so that's good. So what I'll do is I'll try and explain a little bit about what dragon dreaming is before I go into looking at what's happening around the world. Second thing I'd like to ask you is if I speak English at this speed, in this way, alle Leute hier können wir verstanden. Okay? So, that's good. Now, third question. So what I'd like to do is to do a very quick age distribution of people here. So those people who are under 30 years of age, if you could put your hand up. Aha.
You are the only one.
Those who are 30 to 40. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good. 40s to 50s. 50s to 60s. Good. 60 and over. Okay. So the average age would probably be in the 40s.
It's dropping just now, some very young.
Marcus, please come in.
Under 30 years. The average drop.
So what does that mean? That means, given the numbers here at the moment, we have over 1,000 years of human experience in this room. Now, one of the definitions of dragon dreaming is how do we capture that 1,000 years of experience in a creative way that liberates creative intelligence, that liberates collective intelligence. Because in the world in which we come out of a world that is based on a certain type of game that is actually based on collective stupidity rather than collective intelligence. And there's lots of examples of that in every country of the world, and I don't need to tell you Austrians what examples there are in Austria. You know it better than I do. But dragon dreaming is about liberating collective wisdom. And so that's one definition of dragon dreaming. In fact, we've got pages of definitions of dragon dreaming. Another one is that dragon dreaming is about unconditional loving in action, which is another definition. Dragon dreaming is based on 3 objectives. It's based on personal growth for everybody who gets involved. It's based on strengthening the communities that we're a part of, and it's also based in service to the earth. Very often when I write up the the cover sheet here, I give a definition of Dragon Dreaming. Dragon Dreaming ist ein erfolgreich Weg für Projektentwicklung, basiert in der Spiritualität der Aboriginal Australien. That's my attempt at German. That's another definition. One of the things that we've been exploring is that Dragon Dreaming, in fact, is a meta-theory. And by a meta-theory, it's a theory that is capable of absorbing and explaining and giving a framework for lots of different theories. So that's another way of looking at what Dragon Dreaming is. There's a definition that was created by a Frenchman, Nicolas Piet, who's a trainer and took Dragon Dreaming to Montreal in Canada. Nicolas said Dragon Dreaming, because Dragon Dreaming is based, as you'll see, on 4 different steps. And I'll explain the logic of these steps for those people later. But the first step of Dragon Dreaming is the dreaming stage. Every project ever done in the world has started as the dream of just one person. Every project. But what's a project? It comes from the Latin word to throw forward. Pro is forward and jet means to throw. And what we found is that in the beginning was the project. A project, what is thrown forward in a project is a possibility. And once you've thrown the possibility forward, you then have action to go and make that possibility come true. And the biggest project is a project that has now been running for 13.73 milliarden Jahre. It's the universe itself. And what was thrown forward in that project is you people coming here and sitting down and listening to me. And it's had a very long preparation for you to come. You are not here by accident. Okay? So, big projects can have lots of little projects inside them. 90% of human projects we have found get stuck in the dreaming stage. 90%. And the reason why is if you want to make your dreams come true, the first thing you have to do is to share your dream. And unfortunately, most people don't share their dreams. And so they don't happen the way in which they'd like them to. If you want to make your dreams come true, the first thing you have to do is to share your dreams and build a team around your dream that will support you in making it happen. Now, I know there's a lot of people here who have been involved in this project. So I'm going to ask the people who are living here now, do you know who was the person who had the first dream about this place? Because this is an amazing project. No?
Yeah.
Yes, some of you do. We celebrate you. Because what has happened here is you've built a fantastic team. And that team has built itself and keeps on building itself as the project unfolds.
And you initiated it by giving us Dragon Dreaming. That was the first step.
So it liberated the dreaming. Okay. So, I think this is probably the biggest project yet done in Austria. There's been a lot of others, but it's clearly the biggest one yet in Austria.
You've been the Sandman of the dream.
Now, that's the first step. So the second step is to build a team around your dream that will support you in making it happen. And I'll be sharing stories about a lot of these happening around the world at the moment. The mistake people make very often is to go straight from the dreaming stage to the doing stage. And then they wonder why the project doesn't work. What I say is that people do not plan to fail. They only fail to plan. So what you have to do is to take the dream that the people have and go through a detailed planning process to make it happen. And Dragon Dreaming has developed a lot of tools that aid in that planning process. But in conventional project development, what we found is that 90% of projects fail to work according to plan. And the reason why is because we have a faulty idea about the nature of intelligence. First of all, we think intelligence is a thing. And it's a thing that we have in our head. And it's not. What we've found is that intelligence is not an individual factor. It is in fact a collective factor. And it's a factor that connects you to your world and connects the world back to you. So it's a circular process, is the true nature of intelligence. Now, we must pay very careful attention to language. Because in our culture, we think the intelligence is in the head. And so the plans in normal projects, in normal organisations, are created by the head of the project. And then the body of the project is left to do the project. And all you've succeeded in doing is creating two groups of people who can blame each other when things go wrong. Because the head blames the body for not following the plan, and the body blames the head for being completely out of touch with reality. So what we've discovered is that you need, in using Dragon Dreaming, to really integrate the planning and the doing stages, so that the plan actually flows into the doing stage and you create that process. Now, what we then discovered was that 90% of projects do not last longer than 3 years. This project now has been going for
5.5.
5.5. So you're already out of that 90%. And the reason why we've discovered that 90% of projects, it's not just small business startups within 3 years. People who have ideas for small business, 90% of them are not there 3 years later. A lot of non-government organisations, they start off with wonderful ideas and 3 years later they're not there. The reason why is that when the initiators get burnout and the initiators seek to replace themselves, and then they leave the project, and as they leave the project, all of the history of that project, all of the development of the project leaves with the initiators, and the project collapses. I'm going to tell you something that's very, very important. Everyone will leave this project. All of you. You might not leave it for 20 years, but you will leave it. It might not be for 50 years if you're young, but you will leave it. You will leave every project you do. Now, the secret we have discovered in Dragon Dreaming is there is a missing fourth step. A lot of project management tools talk about building a dream or a vision for the project. Hello. Please, take a seat. A lot of people talk about the creating a vision for the project, the planning of the project, and they do the project. But most of them leave out the fourth step. And what we've discovered, there is a fourth step in every project that leads from the doing back to the dreaming. We say that 25% of every project needs to be celebration. You need to be celebrating all the way. In fact, we even say that 25% of the budget of a project needs to be celebration. Austria, believe it or not, is a big project. And you can tell the Chancellor that he needs to start spending 25% of the government budget on celebration.
They do already. They do.
For themselves, perhaps, I don't know. Maybe not. You may be lucky. Most countries don't.
But right now it's the Eurovision contest.
Yes. Yes. I have friends in Australia who are celebrating because we've got an Australian in the Eurovision contest for the first time. Yeah, and I know it's in Vienna, well, over the whole month, really. That's another story. So those are the 4 steps: the dreaming, the planning, the doing, and the celebrating. And so what dragon dreaming is in terms of looking at this intelligence, collective intelligence. Intelligence is a process of flow. And so it's the flow that determines the intelligence, the collective intelligence. And believe it or not, your life is a project. You know, you were small children. Small children spend 80% of their time and they're dreaming. Daydreaming, night dreaming, it's all the same, they're dreaming. Then they become teenagers, and as teenagers you spend a lot of your time planning and rehearsing your plans. You know, how can I be cool? You know, or how can I attract his or her attention? This is the planning stage. And then, as adults, all of you people are in the doing stages of your life until you get to my age, and I want a little bit more celebration, thank you very much. So your life is a project. But then, each day of your life is a project too. You've been dreaming all night, you wake up in the morning, you lie in bed, you make your plans for the day, you get up and do it. And then you come to an evening celebration like this, and if you're wise, you'll celebrate before you go to bed. If you don't celebrate before you go to bed, you'll find yourself taking your work into your dreams. And then you'll wake up next morning and you'll feel exhausted and you won't know why. It's because you've been working all night. So we need to have the 4 steps in every day of our life. So that's basically dragon dreaming. Now Nicolas Briette, the dragon dreaming from France, who set up one of 2 dragon dreaming centres in France. There's 2 dragon dreaming centres in France. I don't know what it is about France, but they build them in the mountains. One is in the French Alps, near Geneva, and the other one is in the Pyrenees. And Nicolas set up the one in the French Alps. And he says dragon dreaming is 4 things. The dreaming part of dragon dreaming, he says, is building a new culture. It's a new win-win-win culture for what in dragon dreaming we call the great turning. Now I need to explain a little bit about the great turning. The next 20 years are going to see more change than any other 20-year period in recorded human history. In fact, it's likely on this planet, the next 20 years, we will see more change than any other 20-year period since dinosaurs last walked on Earth. Now, are you ready to cope with change of that size? The changes are happening so fast now that our communities are having difficulty coping. And all around the world, communities are collapsing. They're happening so fast that our ecologies cannot cope. We are entering a period of climate change. And we've been in periods of climate change before. And from the experience of climate change, like the end of the last ice age, what they find is that living things have 3 strategies. They either move, they adapt, or they die. And we are seeing, at the moment, the 6th great extinction of complex life on Earth that we know of. There have been others too, but we know of 6 in the last 500 million years. And this one is being produced by us because we use up all the resources that are produced by life at the moment by about the 20th of August. That's called World Overshoot Day. So, about the 21st of August, sometime like that. It's called Overshoot Day. We use up all of the available resources that life produces in a year, and humans use them up by 21st of August. And the other thing too is the change is happening too fast for our bodies to cope with, which is why we're seeing the growth of cancers, we're seeing the growth of autoimmune diseases, we're seeing the growth of allergies, we're seeing the growth of sterility in the population. And these are all symptoms of the problems we're facing. Since 1950, there have been 125,000 chemicals released into the environment that did not exist before. And we're carrying this chemical cocktail inside our bodies, and no one knows what the effects of that chemical cocktail is, except that there are carcinogens and teratogens and all kinds of nasties that are involved in that too. So, welcome to the most exciting time in human history. We have 20 years to make a difference. And I think, and I'm of the belief, that by liberating the collective intelligence of groups of people like yourselves, it's possible to make a successful transition. In fact, one of the quotations we use a lot is, never doubt for a single instant that a small group of committed and dedicated people cannot change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. There was a group of 13 people about 2,000 years ago, and the leader went off and left the group of 12 behind. And they created a project called Christianity. And that project's been going now for 2,000 years. And it's made a huge difference to the planet. Now, what Dragon Dreaming is about building a new win-win-win culture. It's got to be a win for us individually, it's got to be a win for the communities that we're a part of, and it has to be a win for the Earth. And that's the dream of Dragon Dreaming. Now, the planning of Dragon Dreaming, Nicholas says, is that Dragon Dreaming is a design philosophy. It's a design philosophy for organising outrageously successful projects and organisations. And I am so glad to be sitting in the middle of one of these outrageously successful projects. So thank you all for the work you've done. I have one wish, that there are now 4,500 people trained in Dragon Dreaming in 37 countries around the world. And I only wish that we'd heard about the need for voting a little bit more, because we could have perhaps mustered 4,500 votes for the competition, and then you would have won hands down. But I only heard about it after the 5th of May, after the closing date, so we couldn't mobilise everybody. But that's a possibility. So that's the second thing about Dragon Dreaming. It's organising outrageously successful projects and organisations as through a design philosophy. The third thing of Dragon Dreaming, the doing of Dragon Dreaming, is hundreds of specific tools and techniques that can be taken by people and combined in different ways to help them make their projects more successful. So that's the doing of Dragon Dreaming. And the celebration of Dragon Dreaming is that the Dragon Dreaming is a supportive community of practitioners who support each other in the projects that they do. And so, this year, in October the 2nd, we're having the 4th International Festival of Dragon Dreaming in Piracanga, in Bahia State in Brazil. And you are all invited. So, if you've never been to Brazil and you'd like to go to Brazil, you're all invited to the 4th International Festival of Dragon Dreaming. The second one was held here in Austria. The first one was in Germany, the third one was in Germany.
The first one was here.
The second one was here. The first one was actually held at the European Permaculture Convergence the year before, and they've been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So, that's one of the things that we can talk about is the international convergence. There's also now a website which has got resources And there's a bit of a problem with our website recently, but we're working to sort it out. www.dragondreaming.org. And if you go there, you'll find there's lots of resources about dragon dreaming. And there's a number of drop-down menus. And if you go to the drop-down menu, which is about us, and you click on that, the second item on that is an open source ebook about dragon dreaming. And you can download it for yourself. And it's translated already into 7 languages. So you can get it in Russian, you can get it in German, you can get it in Portuguese, you can get it in Spanish, in French, in English, in Slovenian, and there's other versions being translated as we go. I go from here to Slovenia, and Slovenia has had the biggest dragon dreaming project so far. What happened in Slovenia was that I did a workshop with people in Finland. In 2009, and there was a Slovenian who came to that workshop at Tampere there, and he decided he was going to take dragon dreaming back to his country. Because Slovenia there'd just been a report produced that Slovenia was the dirtiest country in Western Europe. And so he came up with the idea of using dragon dreaming as a tool to overcome the problems of the filth in Slovenia. People would just take their rubbish and throw it in the forest. And so he went back to Slovenia and created a group of 8, and then that group of 8 created another group of 8, and they kept on proliferating like that. And what they did, they took their mobile phones and on Google Maps they did a rubbish map of Slovenia. As people walk through the forest, they'll just take a photograph of a great pile of rubbish. And they put this rubbish map together. And in 2011, they got 300,000 people onto the streets in one day.
Wow.
It was 15% of the population of the country. And they collected 240,000 tonnes of rubbish in one day. Even the Prime Minister of Slovenia put on rubber gloves and got a plastic bag and went out and collected rubbish. It was a big photo opportunity, obviously. They had free advertising on all the television stations. And as a result of that, Let's Do It, which was the project they did in Slovenia, has gone to Amsterdam, it's gone to Nepal, it's spreading around the world. And so that's the biggest project yet done anywhere on the planet. There is, when I did the Dragon Dreaming workshop in Moscow, there is a Russian businessman who's interested in dragon dreaming. I did a presentation in the town of Tver, and he mentioned that, you may remember that a little while ago there was fires around Moscow, and the soil actually caught on fire because there was so much carbon in the soil that the fires actually got the earth burning, and they were really dangerous, and Moscow had a lot of deaths from asphyxiation and people breathing. And this Russian businessman said he didn't want this to happen again. And so what he has done, he has set up 20,000 environmental clubs in schools right across Russia. 20,000. Now, each environmental club is doing a project. And he's really keen that the projects they do will be based on dragon dreaming. So there's a possibility that when I go back to Moscow, go back to Russia next year, I'm going back to Russia again, St. Petersburg and Kazakhstan, we may find that there will be 20,000 dragon dreaming projects right across Russia. So that's what dragon dreaming can do. Now, at the moment, with these projects that I'm talking about, I hear about these projects, and I'm often the last one to hear about it. I remember when Eric drove me past this site 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and pointed to this place and said, look, that was being developed out of Dragon Dreaming. And that was the first I'd ever heard of it. So I'm usually the last person to hear about these projects. It took me 2 years to hear about the project in Slovenia. So there's a big project in Austria, there's a big project in Slovenia. Now, where did Dragon Dreaming begin? Began here. And that place is the most isolated city on the planet. It's further from everywhere than everywhere. Perth, my city, Perth to Sydney, over here, is the same distance as Madrid to Moscow. And there is nothing between. No other cities of the same size. Adelaide is a bit further down, Melbourne is a bit further down, but they're a long way away. And Australia has the same population as Sao Paulo in Brazil. Western Australia, which is a third of Australia in size. Now, to get from here to here is a 3-hour journey by jet, and you're still in Western Australia. That's how big it is. And Western Australia has a population of 2.3 million people. And of that 2.3 million people, nearly 2 million people, 1.7 million people, live in Perth. So you have, in a third the size of Western Europe, 600,000 people living. It's a very interesting place because I can climb many mountains. And from horizon to horizon, I am the only person there. So it's very different. And that's where it started off. And it started off with an organisation called the Gaia Foundation. And the Gaia Foundation began in 1988. And in 23 years, it did 611 projects. And we were lucky that we didn't have a project that failed. Some projects changed their course, but we haven't yet had a single project that was a loss financially. Now that's a record that can only be broken once. And so if anyone knows of a project that has made a loss financially using Dragon Dreaming, let me know, because I'd be very interested in finding out what happened. But that's where it started. And it probably would have stayed there because the Gaia Foundation, in fact, started as a dream. It started as a dream while I was doing my PhD thesis. Because I had been working up here in Papua New Guinea. And I had been working literally in the last place on Earth. Now, the last place on Earth is the Southern Highlands province of Papua New Guinea. And the reason why it's the last place on Earth is that nobody knew that anyone was living there until the late 1950s, early 1960s. And there's 500,000 people living there. And when the Europeans went up the valleys and discovered, oh, there's all these people here, the Papua New Guineans called the Europeans, well, the people are Australian actually, but they are whites like us. They called us, because I'm a European too, I'm not Aboriginal. They called us the men from outer space. Literally. Because they thought the universe ended where the sky hit the ground on the other side of the mountain. It's just as if you can imagine the little green men appearing over... And there they are. The little green men appearing over Vienna tomorrow and saying, okay, you're now part of the intergalactic empire. And that happened. And what happened was I was very fortunate to be able to go there. I was working for a World Bank project that was looking at community education and community development. And so in 1988, I was finishing the final touches on my PhD thesis about that experience. And we did 10 projects there in Papua New Guinea. And the interesting thing about these projects was that, for instance, we organised an adult literacy project with 400 part-time literacy teachers and 6,000 students in 12 languages simultaneously. Papua New Guinea, the country of Papua New Guinea, has 876 different languages. In this part of the world, is a third of the world's diversity in language. Okay, it's about 5,900 languages worldwide, and a third of them come from Melanesia and the surrounding islands. We did a village nutrition project where we distributed 17,000 chickens and 23,000 tonnes of chicken feed in 3 years. We started up 110 village water supply projects. We ran 318 youth groups and 218 women's groups. We did barefoot village midwife training and appropriate technology workshops. And we did all of this with a staff of 9 people. And so what I was doing in Perth in 1988 was I was writing out my thesis and I was trying to find a way of comparing these different projects. And so Dragon Dreaming began looking at where do projects get blocked? Why do some projects succeed? Why do other projects fail? And we found that all projects go through these same 4 steps, which I want to show you just briefly. So, Susan, if you can take that.
Yep.
And just lay that on the floor. Here, every project starts, as I said, as the dream of a single individual person. But to be successful, the project needs to engage in the environment. And this is the environment here. And that process, with the threshold, with a living membrane between them, moves backwards and forwards in the life of the project. So what happens at the start of the project? 90% of the work needs to come from you. There will be less than 10% coming from the environment. But when that project becomes sustainable, you'll find those figures slowly change. And so you're no longer doing 90% of the work. Okay? 90% of the work is now coming from here, and you only need to put in a little bit to keep it going. So this is a living membrane that moves backwards and forwards in the life of the project. Now this is a one-dimensional model. What we discovered is that there's a second dimension. And if you'd like to take that. And this is the second dimension of your project. And what we discovered was that with this second dimension, this is where you integrate theory with practice. Successful projects are those that manage to fully integrate theory with practice. A theory without practice is irrelevant, but a practice without theory is blind. Now what we find, if this is the theory and practice axis and this is the individual and the environment, what we found is that every project starts off and it's 90% theory. But as the project proceeds, the practical component grows. And so this is a living membrane too. And it's this that creates the 4 steps. The 4 steps here, with the dreaming here, planning, doing, and the celebration. Okay? And we found that all successful projects go through those 4 steps. Even when they don't know it, they're going through this as a family. Now, so that's how Dragon Dreaming started. 2004, we organised a project where we brought 43 people from all around the planet to a tiny little town down here, believe it or not, called Denmark. Denmark, Western Australia is a little community of 7,000 people. And it's done a lot of dragon dreaming. The 43 people that we brought there, they lived together for a month, for 30 days. And the first thing they did when they came was everyone took their watches off. And so for 30 days, we lived outside of time. We had no understanding of what the time was. We got up by the sun and went to sleep by the moon for a full calendar month. And out of that has come an international network of people all around the world who've done the work of Joanna Macy. Now, Joanna Macy is experiential deep ecologist, Buddhist scholar, anti-nuclear activist, very dear personal friend, and we have done lots and lots of work with her. And she runs projects of what she calls the work that reconnects. Because we live in a culture that is profoundly disconnected. And we call that disconnection normal. We are disconnected from three things. We are disconnected from community. We are disconnected from the earth. And we are disconnected from ourselves. And so, the work that reconnects is one of the spiritual basics of the work of dragon dreaming. Now, the person who dreamed up this project with Joanna Macy happens to have been the co-creator of dragon dreaming. Her name was Vienna. And I was fortunate that for 21 years she was my wife. But before this workshop happened, Vivian died from a brain tumour. And it's strange how things go, because witnessing her death was the most difficult thing I've had to face in my life. But it's also the reason that took dragon dreaming out of Australia. 2 years ago I was back in Australia and I received a phone call from the Street Names Committee in Canberra. Now, I didn't even know that there was such a thing. You know, is there a Street Names Committee in Vienna?
Yes.
No, but I discovered that there was one in Canberra, the Australian capital. And they're naming a street in Canberra after Vivian. So she's the co-creator of Dragon Dreaming. And what happened was that it was the people who came to that workshop held in Denmark, who lived in the United States, in Canada, in England, in Germany, that eventually, after Vivian died, I had to leave Australia. I couldn't stay living in a house and living the normal life I did. And so what happened was, on the 10th of June 2008, I flew to Düsseldorf in Germany. Outside of Düsseldorf, Joanna Macy was running a workshop. Because what happened earlier than that was in 2001, Joanna had run a 15-day workshop in Australia, and Vivian had gone up to Joanna and said, "Joanna, I think you need to do a 30-day long workshop, and it needs to be about time." And Joanna said it can't be done. So what Vivian did straight away was to book the seminar centre in 3 years' time, and to book the cook in 3 years' time, without letting Joanna know. And then for Vivian's 50th birthday, Joanna was running a workshop in Assisi on St. Francis of Assisi as the patron saint of deep ecology. And Vivian had 50 friends who came together and bought her a ticket to go to Italy. She'd never been to Italy, but bought her a ticket to go to Italy to do this workshop with Joanna. She went up to Joanna and said, "Joanna, I think we need to do that 30-day workshop that I spoke about. We've got the centre, we've got the cook, the only thing we're missing is you." And Joanna said, "Well, look, come and see me at the end of the seminar." So Vivian went back to Joanna and said, "Okay, you told me to come back." And Joanna said, "I don't think it can be done. But I know that there's one place in the world where perhaps people are crazy enough to make this work. And that's with the Dragon Dreamers of Western Australia." And so she said, "I'll come." And so Joanna came, and we had that workshop in Denmark, 6 months after Vivian died. When Vivian was dying in hospital, Joanna phoned her in the hospital and said, "Vivian, I think that because of the health problems you're having, we should cancel the workshop." And Vivian said, "Joanna, you cancel this workshop over my dead body." So Joanna came. Now, what happened in Dusseldorf in 2008, the 10th of June, was that Joanna said, "John, I want you to run a 2-hour workshop on dragon dreaming." This was the first workshop I'd really run in Germany. And so I did a 2-hour presentation on dragon dreaming. And as a result of that 2-hour presentation on dragon dreaming in Dusseldorf, I got an invitation of the German Permaculture Academy to run a dragon dreaming at their annual gathering at Kleine Klausnik near the border with Poland. And I got an invitation to go to Ghana and run a workshop in dragon dreaming in the first sustainable university in the world. And there's only one of them. It's a university called Valley View in Ghana. They have 5,000 students. And every bit of food that those 5,000 students and the staff eat is grown at the university. And they recycle every drop of water that falls on that university. And they've got solar panels on the roofs. And all the electricity that they need for the university is generated on site. And the toilets are all composting toilets. And they grow the most delicious mangoes and the most delicious pineapples you've ever tasted in your life. And that's Valley View University. And Valley View University was interested in spreading this idea of sustainable universities throughout Africa. Because to run a university and all of these things, the energy, the food, the building materials, they make their own bricks at the university. And when they build their buildings, the bricks fit together like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. You know, the bricks interlock and don't need too much concrete at all. So it's not putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. In fact, the university takes the carbon dioxide out. And that should be like that for every university in the world, not just Valley View. And so they decided that they're going to use dragon dreaming to organise a conference in Ghana and bring universities from all over Africa to Valley View University and teach them what they were doing. And that conference was held in 2010.
Excuse me, the name again of this?
Valley View.
Valley View.
Valley View University. It's a university that's just outside of Accra in Ghana. They've received a lot of help from the German Development Association, GTZ, whatever it is.
It's near Accra? Is it far
Accra
away?
in Ghana, yes.
In Accra.
Now, I also received an invitation at that stage to go to the GEN conference. Now, GEN is the Global Eco-Village Network. And there's GEN organisations in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in North America, and South America, and Australia. And their 20th anniversary this year is being held just there at Findhorn in Scotland. And I've just received this week an invitation to go to Scotland straight after the Findhorn Gen Conference and run Dragon Dreaming in Findhorn. And I've been trying to get to Findhorn to run Dragon Dreaming for the last 5 years. And so they've finally knuckled under. And so I'll be going there this year. But at the Gen Conference at Siebenlinden the eco-village in Germany. They really like Dragon Dreaming, and I've gone back to Siebenlinden every year. I go back there every year, and I run Dragon Dreaming workshops. Now, just to show you how this worked, it was really strange. I was running a Dragon Dreaming workshop in Siebenlinden, and there was a young Ghanaian who comes from Kumasi, which is just a little bit west of Accra. And he's an amazing man. His name is Paul Yeboah. And Paul, in 10 months, had trained 5,000 Ghanaian farmers in permaculture. And it established 5 tree nurseries with 10 million trees. And I was interested in what happened, because I said to Paul, how do you support yourself? Where do you get your money from? And he said, I get paid $25 a week. And he did all of that work on $25 a week. And I said, where do you get the $25 from? And he said, I got the $25 from a man in Perth called Bernie Morrow. And Bernie Morrow was one of the first people I trained in Dragon Dreaming. So I went back to Western Australia. And I got in touch with Bernie and I said, Bernie, I know what you're doing. And he said, what? And I said, you're sending $25 a week to Ghana, aren't you? And he said, how do you know? You see, one of the laws of Dragon Dreaming is that we are linked together in ways we do not know. Believe it or not, there's only 4 links in the chain of personal acquaintance between you people sitting here and Barack Obama. 4 links in the chain. In fact, there's been a research project conducted on Facebook that shows between any 2 people in Facebook, and there's now 2 billion people on Facebook, believe it or not. Between any 2 people in Facebook, there's only 4 links in the chain between any 2 people. Not 6 degrees, we're only 4 now. And those connections are happening even more. Last year, I flew from Perth to Zurich. The Swiss are very active in Dragon Dreaming. They're doing a workshop at St. Gallen this year. The Swiss have they've got a Swiss Dragon Dreaming Association. They've created their own Dragon Dreaming Association. Spain has, Brazil has, France has, other countries have. Germany and Austria haven't yet done it. It's a challenge for you. But I was on the plane, and I was flying from Perth to Zurich, and we stopped at Doha, because I was flying with Qatar Air. And the plane from Doha to the airport it's a very big airport, so it's a 20-minute bus ride from when you get off the plane to when you arrive at the airport terminal. And I was in this bus, and there was 1 seat left, and so I took that last seat. And I was sitting next to a woman, and we got talking. And she said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to Zurich. And she was going to Vienna. And we got talking, and she says, why are you going to Zurich? Is it business or pleasure? And I said, it's business. And she says, what's your business? And I said, I make people's dreams come true. Which is what I often say when I'm travelling like this. And she said, how do you do that? And I explained about dream, plan, do, celebrate. And she said, you're not talking about Dragon Dreaming, are you? And I said, yes. And she said, I have a friend in Vienna who told me that I should do a Dragon Dreaming workshop with John Croft. And I said, I am John Croft. Now, it's really interesting just how connected we are. Because I had a dream that night about a friend of mine who lives in Perth called Robert Hester. And Robert's an interesting man because he's got a boat in the Caribbean. And he married a friend of mine, and for 3 years they travelled around the Caribbean. And I had a dream about Robert that night. And next morning I woke up and I had an email from Robert. And he says, you'll never guess what. He said, I've just received an email from a friend of mine who lives in Vienna who said she met John Croft in a plane in Qatar. As I said, we are linked together in ways you do not know. You know, there's a thing called Dunbar's number. Dunbar's number is how many friends you have. They say these are people that you have the ability to speak with in a fairly intimate sort of way, and it's about 150 people per person. What happens if you get more friends than 150? Then some of your existing friends sort of drop off the list. Our brains are constructed for 150. Chimpanzees can manage about 30. Humans manage 150. It's called Dunbar's number. Now, if you think there's 150 people in your network, and each of those has 150 people in their network, and so there's going to be a lot of overlaps. But it's only 4 links, and we've got to 7 billion people. Now, I believe that the problems that we face as a planet at the moment are growing so fast that what we need to do is to mobilise that network on the planet to save ourselves. But the strange thing that's happening, just as the need to mobilise that network is growing, so also the possibility of mobilising that network is also growing. And the two are converging. And I believe that there is a possibility that the two will converge in the next 20 years. They have to converge if we're going to have a sustainable population in the world. In fact, there's a book being published in England called The Last Human Generation. And it's suggesting that the children that are born today could literally be the last human generation on Earth if we don't make the transition. Now, what happened is...
Another 15 minutes.
Good. What has happened? Yeah. That's 15 minutes to go. Because I want to... No. Then what we do is we have a supper for 15 minutes, and then we come back here and I open it up for questions.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what's happened?
You scared me.
There are now dragon dreamers in Portugal. There's a dragon dreaming centre in the south of Spain that you can look across and see Tangier on the other side. There's been dragon dreaming in Barcelona and Madrid, in the south of France, here. There's dragon dreaming all over Brazil. I've been up the Amazon and run dragon dreaming workshops in a village up the Amazon in the rainforests with the Indians there, and we've got 8 projects that are set up there. This year I'm going to the University of Viçosa, and I'll be teaching dragon dreaming in a university in Brazil for a month. They've got an amazing project there called Educação do Campo, which is changing the whole of the education system in Brazil at the moment. There's dragon dreaming at the University of Valdivia in Chile, and there's dragon dreaming there. We're going to Quito and doing a dragon dreaming train-the-trainer workshop there. There's dragon dreaming at the Albert Einstein University in Brazil. There's dragon dreaming here, here and here, and in Canada. In Montreal, Nicholas Beer took dragon dreaming there. I have just come back from the first dragon dreaming workshop in South Africa, and there's been 2 workshops there. There's a fantastic project, I don't know if you're aware, in the Congo. The Congo has suffered a civil war in the last 10 years. 7 million women have been raped. And what the soldiers in the competing armies do is they go into a village and they take the 10-year-old boys and they force the 10-year-old boys to witness their mother being raped so that they become angry to become soldiers. 10-year-olds. And the girls are taken as sex slaves. And these armies are being funded by multinational corporations who want the minerals for your mobile phones and for your laptop computers. So when you buy mobile phones and laptop computers, you have been funding this war. And there's a woman who is a refugee from the Congo who went to South Africa. And I did dragon dreaming workshops with her in Europe. Her name is Lua. Bichilua Bashikana. And she has gone back to the Congo and she started a project with the pygmy communities in the Congo, who are the people who've suffered the most, to bring the children and the mothers together and heal the wounds. Inside the last sanctuary of the lowland gorilla, there are only 800 gorillas left in the wild. And the project she's setting up not only heals the wounds and the traumas of these people, but the way in which this project is being funded is as an ecotourism venture for people to come and see the last gorillas in the wild. And she's using dragon dreaming. And what we've done in South Africa just recently is we have decided that we're going to be rolling dragon dreaming right across the African continent. Because we are Africans. We've all come out of Africa. And we haven't come out of Africa once. In fact, it's been 7 times. There's been waves of people coming out of Africa. And it's in Africa that the problems are going to be faced first and greatest. With climate change, it's possible that in fact from South Africa to North Africa, all of that in the next generation could be desert. And how is Europe going to cope with 2 billion Africans trying to get into Europe? You think you've got problems with refugees at the moment? Just you wait. And so what we're saying is that what we're trying to do is to say maybe the great turning starts in Africa, because that's where the problems are greatest. And if dragon dreaming can help overcome those problems, it's going to overcome the problems in lots of different places. Dragon dreaming is in Turkey, in Greece, in Romania, in Kazakhstan. Dragon dreaming is in Israel, Palestine. These are all places where workshops have been run. So it's spread, and it's still spreading. We now have 270 people trained around the world as dragon dreaming trainers, of which 52 are active. Thank you, Ryan. He's one. There's others here who are active. Yes, yes. There's a half dozen of them. Yes. Marcus is here somewhere. Yes. Okay. Yes, Susan. Susan, in fact, was one of the people who took dragon dreaming right across the United States through negotiating with the Brazilian through the Evolver Network.
Workshop online.
Yeah. Wow. So dragon dreaming is now gone online.
Great.
So that's the dragon dreaming revisited. Now, where do I see dragon dreaming going? I'd like to train all of you people as dragon dreamers to make your dreams come true. Just to visit the statistics that I mentioned earlier on. If 90% of projects get stuck in the dreaming stage, if you start with 1,000 dreams, in the normal everyday world, only 100 of those get turned into plans. And only 10 of those plans work according to plan. And only 1 of those is still there 3 years later. So you've gone from 1,000 dreams to 1 in 4 steps. And people in Vienna know that. And so what happens in our normal everyday world is people know that you cannot make their dreams come true. And so what they do, from 1,000 to 1 in 4 steps, they give up their dream. And if you walk around the streets at peak time and look into the faces of the people, you'll see that probably about 9 out of every 10 people have given up their dream. Aboriginal people in Australia say, if you give up your dreaming, you've lost part of your soul. And there are symptoms of soul loss: apathy, fatalism, feelings of powerlessness, blaming yourself, blaming other people. endlessly chasing after happiness by thinking, if only I could get something, I'd be happy. Depression. These are the symptoms of our time. So, my dream is over the next 5 years, when I talk about 3,500 projects worldwide, and I've sort of sketched these countries, it sounds like an amazing achievement in only 8 years. But when you think that there are 7.8 billion people on the planet, 3,500 is just a drop in the ocean. In the next 4 years, I want to increase that from 3,500 to 35,000. 350,000 4 years later. As I said, it's a race between mobilising our networks and solving the problems that the world is facing. Now, I had a friend who said, John, getting it from 3,500 to 35,000 is easy. All you need to do over the next 5 years is if every person who's been trained in Dragon Dreaming just trains 2 people a year. And in 5 years, you've multiplied the figure by 10. I thought, yeah, you're right. Because what I'm going to finish with right now is to say that as a result of the talk I've been giving you this evening, you're going to forget 50% of what we've talked about within 24 hours. And within a week, you'll forget 50% of what was left. And in a month, you'll only remember 1/8 of all the things I've been telling you about. But you know the secret to slowing down this forgetting curve is within 24 hours, teach something that you've learned to somebody else. So I encourage you all, within 24 hours, to share what I've been talking about with you tonight. And it'll slow down the forgetting curve. And maybe we will be that small group of people who changes the world. Thank you all.